European Union has imposed sanctions on Syria in response to the government's crackdown on protesters. There are also reports that gunfire has now been heard near the capital in the western suburb of Muaddamia. And Pakistan. Well, the EU says it will impose sanctions on 13 unnamed Syrian officials President Bashar Assad thought not to be among them. The list will be released on Tuesday. Now, the restrictions will include an arms embargo, banning the shipment of equipment that could be used for internal repression. It will also freeze the assets of 13 Syrian officials, preventing them from travelling within the EU. Those 13 officials have been identified as playing a key role in the violent crackdown on protesters. Human rights groups say more than 600 people have been killed in the last few weeks alone. For more on this, let's go to Zuhdi Jasser in Washington, D.C. He's an activist from Save Syria Now, a U.S.-based organization that's trying to raise awareness about the situation in Syria. Thank you for being with us today. Do you think that the EU's actions will make a difference?
Well, I think it's a good first step, but I really don't. I think this is just a slap on the wrist, and the Syrian government is making us for fools in the West. I think if we really want to, I mean, we're talking about a brutal, a totalitarian regime that is circling towns and treating towns like Daraa and Homs and Ben Yas, treating them like you do slaves. They're abusing them, they're torturing them, they're imprisoning thousands upon thousands, and have killed up to 600. And just to do an arms embargo, I think is absurd, especially to save Bashar Assad and his family and his wife's assets and others. They need to target every individual they can if this is going to be effective against a regime like Assad's.
What we're hearing is that the protests themselves are losing a degree of their intensity, and a Syrian government representative is being quoted saying they think they have won.
Well, you know, this is exactly the way they're going to push their propaganda. This is what the chief propagandist, Buthaina Shaban, was telling the West in the New York Times and the one reporter they let in. We need to demand that UN groups go in, that reporters be allowed access so that the world can see the truth of what's happening to the Syrian people and our families. We need to allow access so that we can see that this is not the 80s, but yet another Hama can happen if we don't expose what's happening and begin real sanctions. Kick the diplomats out of Europe and out of America that are Syrian. Take away their passports. Take away their citizenships. Pull our diplomats out of Syria. Make them really isolated as an island in and of themselves.
Why is that not happening then? If things in Syria are as barbaric as you're making out, why are we not seeing stronger sanctions from the EU, from Washington, D.C., the kind of action we're seeing in Libya?
That's a great question. I think part of it is, you know, some of the Mediterranean countries like Greece and Italy were less to act because they've already had people taken kidnapped, etc. So they're already being held hostage by this type of regime. So I don't know. Part of it's fear. Part of it is a lack of will. And I hope the Western leaders, our country in America, our president, when he goes to sleep at night, and our ambassador to the UN, can feel that they are doing everything they can to stop the humanitarian disaster, because I don't feel they are, and I think we have a moral responsibility to help the democratic activists in the uprising in Syria, and we can do more.
Zuhdi Jasser in Washington, D.C., thank you for talking to us. Well, staying with Syria, we still haven't heard anything